Hey, coming with another Northern Monkeys Tactica video. This one's looking specifically at Infernus Marines. They're a unit that everyone probably has 10 of. If you got the Levitathan box, or split with a friend, or just any of the combat patrols, whatever, you'll have some Infernus Marines lying around. But they're a unit that's not really seen in a meta. So I just want to discuss why that is, how you can get a good use out of them, and why I think that this unit is ultimately quite good, but just one that is sort of drowned in the mass of marine units. So right off the start, we're just looking at the datasheet itself. This is a unit that you get 80 points for 5. You can take a 10-man squad for 160. And there's a few reasons to do and don't do that we'll get into later. One of the main things to look at is they have the standard Space Marine stat line there. It's all what you'd come to expect. They are only OC1, unfortunately, but you know, they're sort of more like Hellblasters than Intercessors in many ways, and they're not battle line, which will have an impact going forwards with some of the missions. We're seeing battle line be a bit more pushed, but again, that's a thing we'll talk about later. So looking at them, they've got the grenades keyword, that's always nice, but then their actual in combat 3 attacks, strength 4, it's fine. You'll be able to beat up something like Gaunts or Guardsmen. You know, they'll contribute a bit of damage there, but notably the Sergeant can't take any kind of specialist weapon. Maybe a Pyre pistol, but no, there's no like added punch from a fist or a sword in this squad that other Marine units have access to that are inside of this kind of 80 point bracket. As well as that, their actual Pyre Blasters, they're quite good. They have the Ignores cover, which against a lot of stuff, you know, does equate to +1 AP. These guys are primarily for dealing with enemy chaff in this sort of like basic form. So some Gaunts that are in cover, you'll be able to blast them all. Maybe Orc Boys, you'll prevent them from getting that 4-up save. But generally, they they don't have any AP. They are strength 5. I think that's a key thing for this unit. They're wounding a lot of stuff on 3s. And even against other Space Marines, just the fact that you're going to get the sheer volume of hits you can put through, as long as your opponent doesn't have a 2-up save, you're going to do some damage. Again, even lighter vehicles that are only toughness 8, toughness 9, you'll chip a few wounds onto them. The standard 5-man squad outputs somewhere in the region of 18 shots. So, you know, even if you're wounding on 5s, you're still going to do 6 wounds to something. Chip damage at the end of the day, but still, against a horde armies, another thing we'll talk about later, they're good. And their Purge the Foe ability, it only happens in your shooting phase, so there unfortunately aren't any shenanigans where you can like overwatch a unit and then battle shock them and cause them to fail an action. Like that's just not going to happen. But if you kick an infantry unit, if they were hit by you, they have to take a battle shock test. This is it's a much maligned mechanic in 10th edition, and I mean, unless you're sort of hoping to get lucky and stop one from being able to interrupt when you charge in with a melee unit, it's generally not an ability that you'll see proccing often. And when you do try and proc it, if you're making a big play where you're setting up a big charge and you want to stop your opponent from being able to use those CP to interrupt or heroic intervention, this ability is just so swingy. There's not really a way inside of the Marine Army to influence their leadership, and most times they're going to pass it, unfortunately. So looking at the competition these guys have, I think that's sort of a primary part of why you see so little of these. They're in the Marine Codex, there's loads of different things for them to be up against, and right now they're sort of just in a tough spot that way. Some Marines go like Iron Storm, really, really heavy on tanks. You don't see a lot of these guys. Other Marines go for shooty kind of stuff, but that tends to be more long range firepower. And then for sort of close range firepower, well, why not just take some of the really good melee units that there are out there, especially things like Sword Brethren, all that jazz. Now, in terms of their direct competition, again, they're at about that 80 points on Infernus Marines, so they're up against Assault Intercessors, who are really good right now. Their ability that Assault Intercessors have synergizes great with like fighty captains, fighty characters, and just in general sort of taking enemies off the point. They're going to do a lot of damage, and they have that inbuilt rerolls, that inbuilt AP. That's just something the Infernus squad doesn't have. So where the Infernus squad might have more volume than those guys, they just don't have the quality that they have. Same again for intercessors. If you're looking at these guys as sort of action monkeys, the intercessors are really good at that. They've got the assault ability, which it previously allowed them to advance and do actions. That's not going to happen anymore. But that sticky objectives ability that intercessors have, that's a great utility piece that a sort of semi-elite army like Marines will want to take advantage of. And then also in this wheelhouse, Sternguard veterans who they kind of in many ways do fill a similar role to Infernus Marines. They bring a volume of fire. They get 3 shots within the 12-inch range. They have the dev wounds, things like that. So all of these squads sort of have good synergies on their abilities and have a sort of a good output that matches the Infernus Marines. So really the niche that Infernus Marines have to have, since they can't benefit from things like lethal hits, sustained hits, like these squads can, they have to find their niche specifically inside of the Overwatch ability, which on very dense boards can sometimes be tricky to get if your opponent's hiding behind a solid wall and charges you through it. But also costs you a CP, which none of these other squads are asking really for a CP to do their thing, and is also once per turn, so you're going to kind of struggle to use it. And as well as that, being in the Marine Codex, of course, there's competition. Do you really want to Overwatch with an Infernus squad when there is a Land Raider Redeemer that you can potentially do the same thing with? So all of these things leave Infernus Marines sort of scrambling to find a niche, which I think sucks for them, because they're a cool unit, plenty of people have access to the models. So what really can they offer there? You have to look at this in terms of using that Overwatch and using them as kind of a tradey sort of small unit, because they bring a sheer volume, like the number of things that they output for that 80 points. If your opponent's got units like scouts, things like that, that moved up onto objectives, and are relying on abilities like stealth, they're relying on things like having cover, they won't do them any good against Infernus Marines. So that's where they can really shine, taking sort of sticky units like that out through sheer volume. And as well as that, the Overwatch threat isn't nothing. If your opponent needs to get in quarters for engage, they want to do actions, they can really hurt that. So this is only speaking from my personal experience and kind of observations. What detachment makes these guys really work? I think the obvious one is Firestorm, specifically because of this stratagem, immolation protocols. It's a battle tactic, so your captains can make it free, but essentially it gives the unit devastating wounds. As I said, even a 5-man squad of these guys outputs about 17, 18 shots, so this is likely to bag you 3 mortal wounds off that, which can be pretty bad. But obviously if you've got the big 10-man squad and they do this, for only 1 CP you could easily see yourself netting about 6 mortal wounds, and there's no cap on it. So if you happen to roll really, really well, especially with certain like setup, then you'll really, really come to take a chunk out of a unit that might not have been ready for it. Even big powerful threats like Redemptors, things like that, you know, they don't necessarily have a defense against the mortal wounds. However, obviously you're far happier shooting this into an enemy that you know, just to thin out a huge horde of guys, even orc boys, things like that, you'll chop them up with this. Inside of Gladius, there is a stratagem for 1 CP that lets them gain a pip of AP. That's quite nice, especially if you've got a big unit of these guys. I'm going to sort of talk about the viability of them beyond just a little 5-man squad later, but yeah, unfortunately the other synergy with that is that it gives them ignores cover, which isn't something that's really they're going to benefit from at all since they already have it. But just being able to get AP, maybe actually have a chance of putting a serious bit of damage on something with a good save, that's quite nice. And obviously with ignores cover built in, you don't have to worry about anything like your opponent's that AP being mitigated by something like cover. And obviously in both of these detachments they have all the little synergies. I know in Firestorm the ability to get out of transports and get those auto hits, that's quite nice. And in Gladius, the ability to move when an enemy comes close to you. Like if you've brought a big squad of these guys out and they nuke a unit, and then an enemy comes in to countercharge them, you could hit them with Overwatch and then move away from them, which is kind of a double whammy. But again, that's all quite CP intensive for this unit. So how much value you're going to get out of that is neither here nor there. And again, in Firestorm, you kind of end up competing with stuff like the aggressors with the Flamestorm gauntlets. They've got twin linked on their guns, so even though they've got less shots, the twin linked allows you to fish for those dev wounds, which Infernus Marines can't do. So in a perfect world, yeah, your detachment can give you a little bonus to these guys, specifically this one circumstance in Firestorm, which does lead to them being seen in Firestorm. Still, in other lists, they just aren't repping the Infernus Marines. So, talking about leaders for this unit, there's a few things that sort of like initially might seem good, but then they fall down just due to the nature of the unit. So, one of the really popular Space Marine leaders right now is Azrael, but you know, this unit would benefit from his 4+ invuln and benefit from the CP that he's generating. However, what are the sustained hits doing for him, you know? That's wasted. Same with the Lieutenant. The fall back and shoot, that's kind of nice for these guys. They're going to be getting danger close, so if they get tagged up, all of a sudden they can fall back. That's nice. But then the unit can't benefit from those lethal hits. It really sucks. But there are a few things. For example, what I've been sort of testing out and has worked well for me in the past is a big 10-man block of these guys with a Librarian. Now, this isn't too many points, only runs you about, I think 220, which, you know, while that's comparable to like a Redemptor Dreadnought, it obviously has to do work. It's actually quite nasty, specifically in Gladius, where you can give them the AP, so that's nice. But the Librarian is there partially because he contributes firepower to the unit, but also gives them a 4-up invuln, which suddenly makes a big 10-man brick of Marines quite a pain to shift. You know, at the end of the day, you've got to do so many wounds to them just in order to get them to fail those invuln saves. So they can kind of become quite sticky and annoying to get through. And again, there's no wasted kind of abilities on the Librarian. They benefit from everything he gives from them. The protection from Psychers, the 4-up invuln, all of those are things the Infernus squad likes. A Captain is another good one. However, he can't make Overwatch free anymore due to the data slate. But still, he can kind of, you know, he gives them a bit of punch in melee, as well as those free stratagems. Especially, I think you'll see this combo in the Firestorm detachment, because you can get that Mortal Wounds stratagem for free and twice with the Captain's ability, which is really, really good. And lastly, while we're just talking about leaders, an honourable mention I want to give them is Tigerius. Bit of a niche unit, but he's quite cheap for what he does. He gives you a massive amount of high quality firing power. When he does the hazardous test, it's actually 2d6 shots, which is really, really good. It actually lets him contribute somewhat to the Overwatch this unit can kick out, just because of his volume. But then on top of that, he allows them to use the Overwatch or the Go to Ground stratagem for free, which is really, really good. Because again, you want to be overwatching every turn with these guys, but maybe you need to be like using your CP elsewhere to get your damage out of other units. And obviously, Go to Ground, these guys could be stood out in the open, suddenly get a cover save that, you know, even las cannons they're getting a 5-up save from. It's not bad at all. So yeah, those are worth considering. I've had particular success with the Librarian, just because this sort of large 10-man brick, up against certain opponents, like Genestealer cults, orcs, sort of other armies that don't have good quality shooting, it could really, this unit just shoving itself up the centre with its 4-up invuln, it was just really hard to deal with. And even other units like Marines, the sheer volume will just kill a 10-man, you know, not a 10-man squad of Marines, but will kill a bunch of Space Marines if it needs to. So yeah, I like the Librarian. It makes the squad tough, it's relatively cost effective, and he synergizes well with them. Tigerius is another thing that I'd want to experiment with down the line, but he's a handy little unit for his points cost, so that'll be good to see how that goes. So, kind of final thoughts on the Infernus Marines. While I think they're definitely not, like, you're not throwing the game by including 1 or 2 units of these guys in your army, just as little 5-man trading piece squads, they definitely just don't seem efficient. That could change with the meta. Sort of thinking about one of the lists that's become quite popular is the Endless Swarm Tyrannid lists. And a 10-man unit of Infernus Marines will happily step up, kill an entire squad of those guys, and then kill another squad on Overwatch. And also be able to sort of deny a lot of the actions. I've noticed the new mission pack has a lot of sort of mid-board actions. So potentially a big 10-man squad of Infernus Marines can genuinely stop enemies from being able to perform those, which is quite nice, especially because they fire their Overwatch. They can do that in the movement phase, which then means that your opponent doesn't really have a chance to interact with them before they have to be exposed to their shooting. Obviously, that doesn't work against all armies, and it doesn't work if your opponent's got other spots they can go off and do the action in. So you really do need to think about that. However, sort of thinking about the meta, if like these big swarm kind of armies do become in the meta, do Infernus Marines work? Yeah, they'll mess up gaunts. Potentially even things like Sisters of Battle with their Repentia squads. A big unit of these guys, while they are a prime target for getting chopped up by Repentia, they would also wreck them with Overwatch. So as long as you don't let your opponent get a charge on you through the wall, you have always got that to fall back on. However, against Orc Boys, which, that do seem to be like, was it Green Tide, I believe is the detachment, that does seem to be growing in popularity as people actually get the models together. Even a 10-man squad of Infernus Marines, if the Orcs have a Pain Boy, you're only killing about 6 of them on the Overwatch, which just does not cut it at all. So, not really the best there. But yeah, I think in certain contexts, a big 10-man unit of Infernus Marines is pretty fun, and can give your opponent some real head scratchers. And obviously, if you're running them in the Firestorm detachment, they've got that extra synergy there. But ultimately, try out 2 little 5-man squads of these guys in the game. They're genuinely fun. The Overwatch is genuinely a threat. And at the end of the day, they're 80 points. They're not worse than a lot of the other Space Marine stuff. It's just all about those individual scenarios and trying to set yourself up for a good use of their auto hits. So yeah, if you've enjoyed the video, like and subscribe. But yeah, come back for more next week.